Hollywood paints medieval battles as grand and organized, but the raw truth is far uglier. In those first chaotic moments, nearly half the front line tripped within 15 seconds, sprawling over muddy fields riddled with hidden roots and uneven ground. Forget cinematic glory. This was a pure, desperate mess. Want to know what soldiers truly endured in those terrifying opening seconds? We're pulling back the curtain with hard facts and vivid visuals grounded in historical accounts. Stick with us to uncover the gritty reality of warfare, starting with the very first stumble. Let's step right into those first brutal moments of a medieval battle, where chaos ruled before a single weapon was swung. Picture yourself lined up with hundreds of others, the air thick with tension, as the order to advance ripples through the ranks. You take your first steps, not into a glorious charge, but into a frantic mess that defines the clash's opening seconds. Half the front line, about 50% of soldiers, according to archaeological findings, stumbles within the first 15 seconds, tripped by muddy fields, uneven ground, or the sheer crush of bodies shoving forward. This isn't the tidy advance of movie armies. It's a desperate scramble just to stay on your feet. The terrain itself is your first foe. Forget flat, open plains where knights gallop in perfect sync. Real battlefields were treacherous patches of churned dirt, often slick with rain or tangled with hidden roots and rocks. Every step is a risk, a gamble against twisting an ankle or pitching forward into the mire. Sites like Towton, where skeletons unearthed by archaeologists show broken bones from falls rather than blade strikes, reveal how deadly the ground could be. Men didn't just drop from enemy blows in those initial moments. Many were crushed under the boots of their own comrades, unable to rise before the next wave rolled over them. Fear hits hard as this unfolds, but it's not some noble dread of combat. It's the raw panic of losing your footing. There's no inspiring music, just the ragged gasps of men around you, and the occasional sharp cry, like a soldier yelping, "Ah, my ankle!" as he crumples into the sludge. The stink of damp wool and sweat clogs the air, and your vision jolts with every uneven stride. Your only thought is to keep moving, keep standing, because hitting the dirt means you're likely done before the enemy even reaches you. The ground feels like it's conspiring to take you out first. Add to this the burden of your gear, dragging you down with every step. If you're wearing armor, it could tip the scales at 45 to 55 pounds, turning each movement into a fight against gravity on slick, muddy earth. It's not just heavy, it's a sweat-soaked trap cooking you as you struggle. Even without armor, the weight of a shield, weapon, and thick boots throws off your balance. You're no storybook warrior with flawless poise. You're an exhausted foot soldier, muscles burning, praying you don't slip as the crowd surges and shoves around you. Look at the visuals we've paired with this. Soldiers slipping in thick, clinging mud. Maps highlighting the jagged, uneven lay of historical battlegrounds. This wasn't a stage for heroics. Evidence from digs at places like Towton shows cracked skulls and shattered limbs, injuries from tumbling hard into the dirt or being trampled in the pileup. Staying upright wasn't a small victory. It was the only thing between you and a quick, inglorious end in those frantic first seconds. Here's the harsh reality. The start of a medieval battle wasn't about valor or strategy. It was a clumsy, brutal wrestle with the earth itself, a fight to stand before you could even think of facing the enemy. And if you managed to keep your feet through that chaotic tumble, you'd soon grip something just as rough and unforgiving as the ground beneath you. Now, with your footing barely secured in that initial chaotic surge, your hands close around a weapon that feels more like a grim necessity than a symbol of valor. Let's strip away the Hollywood gloss and look at these medieval tools of war for what they truly were: brutal, unpolished instruments built not for show, but for breaking bodies. These weren't props to pose with. They were rough, practical things meant to end lives as quickly as possible. Picture yourself clutching a war axe, nothing like the ornate relics in museum displays. This is closer to a farmer's wood chopping tool, repurposed with a heavier iron head and a jagged edge. The wooden shaft scrapes against your calloused hands, weighing around 5 pounds, dragging at your already weary arms with every motion. You don't need skill to wield it, just raw strength to slam it down, hoping to split a shield or crush a helm. But here's the catch. These axes often got stuck in whatever they hit, be it armor or bone, like a phone dying at 99% charge. Yanking it free took lethal effort, leaving you exposed for precious seconds while someone else could close in. Axes like these were everywhere on the battlefield, not because they were elegant, but because they were cheap and easy to make, often just modified farm gear. Peasants forced into fighting carried them, not out of choice, but necessity. They didn't cut clean. They hacked and smashed, turning a man into a broken heap with one good strike. Maces followed the same brutal logic, nothing but a heavy metal lump on a stick, designed to dent armor and shatter bones with sheer force. No finesse, just impact, over and over until something gave way. Then there's the sword, the weapon everyone imagines when they think of medieval combat. Truth is, if you weren't a noble or a well-paid fighter, you'd likely never touch one. They cost as much as a small house, requiring skilled craftsmanship and rare materials. Archaeological finds from battle graves show even those who had swords often resorted to using the heavy pommel for blunt strikes, the so-called murder stroke, because in the tight press of bodies, there was only 6 inches of space to swing the blade. Most soldiers, up to 70% in some armies, gripped spears instead. Just a long wooden pole with a sharp metal tip, they were cheap to mass produce and deadly when thrust into a crowded line, though a snapped shaft or a stuck point left you defenseless in a heartbeat. These weapons weren't made to endure a long fight. That spear might break after a few jabs, turning into a useless stick while you're still in the thick of it. An axe could chip or dull after smashing into armor, reducing it to a clumsy bludgeon mid-battle. There's no pause, no reset like in staged fight scenes. One wrong move, one jammed or broken tool, and you're exposed, vulnerable to the next blow. Look at our visuals. Replicas of real weapons, rough and scarred, not polished museum fakes. Finds from sites like Visby show axes and maces with chipped heads and bent shafts, proof of the messy, violent work they did against flesh and steel. You're starting to feel it now, aren't you? The weight of that crude tool in your hands, the stark reality that a single missed swing could be your last. These weren't objects of honor or artistry. They were built for one ugly purpose, and as unforgiving as they were to wield, imagine being encased in something that promised safety, but often delivered its own kind of torment. Now, with the weight of a crude weapon still heavy in your grip, let's turn to the metal shell that's supposed to keep you alive. Armor in medieval battles is often seen as a soldier's ultimate safeguard. But was it truly protection, or more like a prison forged from steel? The reality on the battlefield was far grimmer than the shining suits and paintings suggest. Imagine yourself wrapped in this gear after surviving the chaos of the first clash. You're clad in chainmail, or, if you're among the better equipped, segments of plate armor strapped across your body. At first, it feels like a shield against the violence around you, a barrier between your flesh and the enemy's steel. But that sense of security fades fast as the sun climbs and the metal encasing you turns into a furnace. Within just 20 minutes, the temperature inside your helmet can soar past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, baking you in what feels like a portable sauna. Sweat streams down your face, soaking the padded layers beneath, while every breath pulls in hot, stale air. You're not just battling foes, you're wrestling with the heat threatening to sap your strength before a blade even nears you. The weight adds another layer of torment. Full plate armor typically ranged from 20 to 25 kilograms, about 45 to 55 pounds, distributed across your frame, which is less than what modern soldiers carry but still a punishing load. Every step feels like wading through thick mud, especially on the uneven, slick ground of a battlefield. Quick moves or sudden dodges are out of the question. You lumber forward, muscles straining, hoping to close the distance before exhaustion takes over. In long fights, this burden wore down even seasoned fighters, leaving them sluggish and vulnerable. You're not a nimble warrior. You're a slow-moving target, praying your legs don't give out under the relentless drag of your own protection. Yes, armor could turn aside some threats. A sword's edge might skid off plate or snag in chainmail, sparing you a fatal cut. But it was no guarantee against the raw power of blunt weapons. Maces and warhammers didn't need to pierce steel to kill. Their force could shatter bones or collapse your chest right through the metal. Historical evidence shows that about 40% of armored knight casualties suffered broken bones despite intact plates, proof that sheer impact often overpowered the best defenses. A single heavy blow could drop you, gasping in the dirt, unable to rise as the fight raged on. That's steel bought moments, not invincibility. Then there's the helmet, your guard against head strikes, but also a trap of its own. Your field of view shrinks to a thin slit, blinding you to threats from the sides or rear. You twist your neck constantly, trying to spot danger, but it's a guessing game in the swirl of combat. Sweat stings your eyes, blurring what little you can see, while every clash of metal echoes inside, drowning out cries or commands. You're locked in a cramped, noisy shell, half-blind and disoriented, with no way to know where the next strike will land. Look at the visuals we're showing. Real armor, scarred and dented from use, alongside reenactments of fighters staggering under its weight. Chronicles from centuries past record knights collapsing mid-battle, felled not by weapons, but by heat stroke, their gear betraying them under a merciless sun. This wasn't just protection, it was a suffocating cage, amplifying every ache and risk. And as your body struggles under this burden, something even heavier begins to press down, something no steel can shield you from. As the metal encasing you turns every movement into a grueling test, an even heavier force begins to claw at your mind. Let's uncover the psychological hell of combat, the unseen battle that could shatter a soldier long before a blade ever touched them. You've stumbled through the initial chaos, wrestled with cumbersome gear, and now you're thrust into a storm that attacks your sanity with as much ferocity as any weapon. Picture yourself pressed tight among a mass of fighters, the air thick with tension and the stink of sweat. The clash has begun, and the first thing to strike isn't steel, but a wall of noise that slams into you like a physical force. It's a brutal mix of metal, scraping against metal, harsh shouts, and piercing screams of pain or terror that slice through the din. The sound is so overwhelming, you can't pick out a single command or cry for help. Your head pounds with a relentless roar, stripping away any chance to focus. Combat psychologists note that up to 70% of soldiers make involuntary noises in battle, grunts or yells born of raw fear, not discipline, adding to the cacophony that leaves you dazed and disoriented from the start. Confusion piles on as the battlefield turns into a blinding haze. Dust and blood spray mix in the air, stinging your eyes and reducing everyone to indistinct shapes. You can't tell an ally from enemy in the murk. A figure rushes towards you, and in a split second of panic you swing, only to hear a too familiar groan. Historical records suggest friendly fire incidents reached up to 10% in some engagements, a grim toll of mistaken strikes in the chaos. Every move becomes a gamble, laced with dread that you've just harmed one of your own, the guilt gnawing at you even as you fight to survive. That terror can lock you in place, as accounts from battles like Crecy reveal. Soldiers sometimes froze mid-fight, not from injury, but from a mind overwhelmed by fear. Your weapon feels like dead weight in your hands, your legs refuse to budge, and the chaos swirls around you while you stand helpless. It's not weakness, it's your brain shutting down under unbearable strain. Modern studies on battle mind describe how vision tunnels in combat, reducing you to reacting to mere shapes and motion, not faces or reason. Higher thought vanishes, leaving only raw instinct to lash out at anything that moves, making the fray even more deadly and disjointed. The mental toll drives many to breaking point early. Historical texts show about 40% of medieval armies fled before the fighting peaked, choosing survival over any notion of honor. No training could fully brace you for this soul-crushing fear, where every scream and jolt of movement builds until your grip on reality frays. Our visuals capture this disarray, tight, frenzied reenactments where no one seems in control, mirroring the panic of being hemmed in by bodies with no clear path or purpose. This unseen war within often wounded deeper than any physical blow. The silent scars of terror and confusion could unravel even the hardiest fighter, leaving them hollow amid the clash. And as you struggle to hold your mind together through this relentless assault, a new stark fear looms on the horizon, ready to test you in ways no amount of willpower can prepare you for. As the mental storm of combat threatens to tear you apart, a more immediate and brutal danger cuts through the haze. So let's confront the grim reality of wounds in a medieval battle. where a single strike could unravel everything in an instant. You've endured the chaotic first clash, the weight of gear, and the terror clawing at your mind. But now, amid the roar and crush of bodies, a weapon finds its mark, and the true cost of fighting reveals itself in blood and broken flesh. Imagine the moment it happens. Metal screaming through the air as a warhammer crashes down. This isn't the tidy wound of a movie scene where a hero shrugs off a scratch. The blunt force smashes into you, armor or not, with enough power to turn bone into jagged shards beneath your skin. Even plate couldn't always save you. Historical data shows about 40% of knight casualties came from downward skull or neck strikes, brutal hits that rarely cut clean but crushed and mangled instead. The pain is immediate, a white-hot surge that blots out the battlefield's noise, leaving your limb, or worse, your head, useless in a heartbeat. You're not fighting anymore. You're just trying to comprehend the ruin. These injuries weren't cinematic slashes, but ragged, gaping tears through flesh, spilling blood in torrents. A major wound to the chest or leg could bleed you out in under 5 minutes, not a vague weakening, but a rapid, dizzying drain. Your vision darkens as warmth gushes from the gash, soaking your gear, slick under your fumbling hands. There's no time for a heroic stand, no strength to swing back. Your body falters, cold creeping in with every fading pulse, the ground rushing up as you collapse amid the chaos. Just another fallen shape in the dirt. Surviving that first hit often meant little. If the strike didn't kill outright, the aftermath became a different kind of enemy. There was no clean medical aid waiting. Battlefield surgery had success rates hovering near 30%, with wounds often cauterized by heated daggers, a desperate measure that burned as much as it saved. Monastery records from the 15th century paint a stark picture. Infection claimed more lives post-battle than the weapons did during the fight. A gash crudely bound by a comrade's dirty hands festered fast, rot setting in as fever and agony took hold over days, a slow death no courage could outrun. Picture yourself downed, the battle's din fading as shock numbs your edges. At first, the wound is a distant ache, masked by the rush still pounding in your veins. Then it sharpens, a searing stab you can't escape, though you're not even sure where it's coming from. You paw at yourself, fingers slipping in blood, trying to gauge if you'll stand again. But the weight of it drags you down, legs buckling, leaving you sprawled as boots thunder past. No one stops. There's no pause for mercy in this mess. You're alone with the damage, the fight rolling over you like a wave. Our visuals hammer this home. Skeletons from Teuton's mass graves, bearing marks of savage, repeated blows, not single clean strikes. These men were battered until nothing remained to break, their bones telling stories of unrelenting violence. Rusty tools from the era, crude and brutal, show what passed for care, often worsening the harm. A wound wasn't just an injury. It was the start of a grueling, often fatal ordeal. And for those who somehow clung to life through this misery, the end of the fight brought no relief, only a different kind of weight to bear. As the echoes of combat fade and the sting of wounds lingers, you're left standing on a field that feels more like a graveyard than a place of triumph. Let's face the stark truth of the aftermath in a medieval battle, where there are no victory cheers, no banners raised in glory. What comes next is a heavy, hollow silence, a reality of exhaustion and raw survival that strips away any notion of heroism. Picture yourself still on the battlefield, the clash of steel gone, leaving only the harsh rasp of your own breath. You've dragged yourself through the chaos, maybe bloodied, maybe whole, but there's no surge of pride, no shouts of conquest. Instead, you and the others around you slump where you stand, some dropping to the dirt, others just leaning on battered weapons, too drained to utter a word. Historical accounts describe survivors sitting or lying where they fell, their bodies and minds so spent that even speaking feels impossible. Your limbs ache with a deep, throbbing fatigue, the weight of hours of fear and strain pinning you in place. The air reeks of blood and damp earth, a bitter reminder that nothing grand was won here, only the grim luck of still drawing breath. The next task is as cold as it is necessary. You force yourself to move, trudging through the mud to scavenge among the fallen. It's not greed driving you, but the hard edge of survival. You strip boots, dented armor, and chipped weapons from the dead, whether they fought beside you or against you. Contemporary records note that scavenging was so rampant, up to 20% of soldiers ended up wielding improvised farming tools, turning battlefields into grim recycling grounds. Your hands work mechanically, prying off gear with no thought for who wore it last, only for what might keep you alive another day. There's no room for sentiment when your next fight, or your next meal, depends on a scavenged blade or a pair of worn soles. The wounded around you fare no better in this bleak aftermath. Their groans drift across the field, weak and desperate from where they lie in the open or under crude shelters of torn cloth. There's no proper care, just hasty bindings of dirty rags over gaping cuts. Accounts from battles like Hastings paint a brutal picture. Men moaning through the night, many slipping away before dawn as infection or blood loss claims them. You shuffle past, avoiding their hollow eyes, the sound of their pain burrowing into your thoughts. There's nothing you can offer, and a selfish relief flickers that it's not you sprawled there, waiting for the end. No parades or honors await those still standing. All you carry are the bruises now pulsing under your skin, the dull ache of overworked muscles, and the sharper sting of empty spaces where comrades once stood. You see it in the faces around you, gazes blank with the weight of what's been lost, no one daring to voice the tally of the missing. Historical sources reveal that up to 40% of forces often fled before combat even peaked, a stark sign that desertion trumped any last stand. There's no glory in this quiet, just the slow grind of survival, a prize that feels more like a burden with every passing moment. Look at the images we've pulled together. Fields strewn with discarded gear, silent and eerie, alongside sketches of mass burial sites from the era. The bones unearthed centuries later whisper of a toll no song could soften. Winning meant nothing more than outlasting the slaughter, a bitter truth that hangs heavy as you sit among the wreckage. It's a realization that cuts to the core, reshaping everything you thought you knew about the cost of battle. As the weight of survival settles into your bones, let's wrap up with a final look at the brutal truth of medieval battles. These weren't epic tales of glory, but raw, desperate struggles where just making it through was the only victory. Remember, nearly 50% of the front line tripped in the first 15 seconds, a staggering start to the chaos that defined these fights. If this unvarnished history hit home, tap that like button, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments, which of these harsh realities surprised you most? Next time, we'll uncover the grim world of medieval medical treatment.